Food is critical, and there is a problem with our food system. The Garden Tower project is trying to change that. We're asking for your help to afford a minimum order of our new garden towers. We've been here before, and the Kickstarter community has helped us grow. Since then, we've developed an even better garden tower, one that's easier to use, lasts longer, and functions better. First, let me tell you why we're doing this. It's because food is one of the most important elements of a person's life. We all need it. We all think about it every day. But right now, the world is experiencing some serious problems with our food, from our environment to our health. Even for well-informed people, it's sometimes difficult or impossible to know where their food is coming from, how it's been handled, or what's been added to it. Food scarcity is also a huge problem, especially in our cities, where many households with children don't know where their next meal is coming from. My name is Colin Cudmore. I believe we can do better. In fact, I know we can do better. It's what inspired me to invent the Garden Tower. And with the help of my two dedicated co-founders, Joel Grant and Tom Tlesty, we have shipped nearly 4,000 garden towers to people in all 50 states. The Garden Tower is a unique soil-based garden system that incorporates the magic of Mother Nature, vermicomposting, all in one container. It combines what the earth does naturally and makes it possible to implement in so many more places. Anyone with a balcony, deck, patio, or yard has the ability to grow tons of fresh veggies, fruits, herbs, and more. When you place food scraps into the central column, the soil is enriched and naturally fertilized, resulting in the freshest, most nutritious organic food you can get. The Garden Tower also retains moisture and insulates the plant roots. Many of our customers have success growing food in places like Phoenix, Austin, and other hot zones, in addition to later in the season in cold zones. Urban city centers lined with concrete, where it was once impossible to grow your own food, are now seeing garden towers pop up on rooftops, porches, and balconies alike. Our customers have learned quickly that the Garden Tower pays for itself in produce, in addition to improved quality of that food. After successfully funding one of the biggest food-related Kickstarters to date, we have been focusing on the next steps to bring garden towers to the over 40 countries who are demanding them. Realizing that our big, expensive, hand-built model cannot be scaled globally, we have created a new generation of the Garden Tower by incorporating all that we have learned, including the feedback from our customers. However, we need your help to fund the minimum number of orders required to produce this new generation Garden Tower, which is the best product we've ever made and is available at a special price through this Kickstarter only. You're going to want the new generation tower. My approach for the improvements focus not only on ease of use and functionality, but also the biological performance to enhance nutrition, delivery, and availability. Basically, the plants will get even more of the good stuff. A removable screen will allow for emptying of the organic compost from the tube and into the drawer to be recycled back into the soil. An internal bearing track allows for one-handed rotation 360 degrees for optimal sun exposure. It's equally convenient for anyone with physical limitations. Additional rings can be added and removed as desired, with a max capacity of 70 plants in a footprint of only 4 square feet. These rings nest together for shipping to bring the package height to only 25 inches, and the entire system can be assembled in under 5 minutes. This new version will be made of food-grade plastics with 0 BPAs and made here locally by a world-class manufacturer. The moment anyone begins growing food in a garden tower, they are strengthening our food system. It's pretty easy to understand that good food is connected to a healthy life. Let's take back control of our food and our health today. Thank you for your support.
guys, how's it going?
Good, Benny. What's going on?
Going well.
Who are you?
I'm Colin Cudmore, inventor of the Garden Tower and founder of the Garden Tower project.
I'm Joel Grant. I've been working with Colin since the original prototype of the Garden Tower.
Well, that sounds really cool. What is the Garden Tower?
The Garden Tower started out as an idea to try to bring access to people to grow their own healthy food. And it originated, I'll just make a quick story out of it, originated from a lecture that I attended at Indiana University by a guy named Will Allen, who runs an outfit in Milwaukee called Growing Power. And what Mr. Allen talked about a lot at this lecture was what he calls food deserts, which is areas across the country and, as we all know, across the world that lack access to fresh food. And it's usually because people live in poor neighborhoods and the stores don't often build in those poor neighborhoods, and people may lack adequate transportation to get there. And they're often subsiding off of convenience stores or smaller shops that won't have fresh vegetables or any assortment of organic vegetables at all. So I really thought that there was a need there. And as an inventor, I thought that was something I would pursue, and that's what I did.
What is the Garden Tower?
The Garden Tower is a vertical growing system that allows people to grow their own healthy food. And the nice thing about it is it's very portable. You can put it in a very small area, like on a deck in an apartment building or a flat roof, or down on a walkway or lawn. It takes up about 4 vertical feet on the ground, but it grows vertically, so you can grow, in our first generation, you can grow about 50 plants. Our next generation, Gen 2, you can grow, with adding a couple rings, you can grow upwards of 70. But what we've noticed is that the nutrients that are available to the plants are so excessive that you can double up a lot of the plants in the holes, and you could probably grow upwards of 140 plants in one garden tower with 2 additional rings. Or if it was just, you could normally grow, like 70 or 50, somewhere in that range. And it's a system where people can recycle their food scraps into the system to create the nutrients for the plants. And you're gonna make me laugh. Gonna have to do another take on that.
Go ahead, so start again from where?
It's a system where we are allowing people to recycle their food scraps into a vermicomposter within a soil system.
Okay, that's
there's
really
a whole bunch of benefits to that, which Joel can get into. But we're the first people to actually offer a product that we know, at least as far as we know, where it gives you the ability to vermicompost within a soil system to provide the nutrients to grow the plants.
So you've got a container garden, and you put your kitchen scraps into it.
Yeah.
And vermicomposting, I'm not quite familiar with it. It all sounds, is it easy to use?
It's very easy to use, and Joel can get into the science behind the vermicomposting. That's really like the key benefit to using this type of system.
So when we looked at how would we integrate composting into a soil-based container gardening system, which, as Colin's explained, the beauty of that is that we can bring one item or one unit, one tower to a patio or balcony or rooftop. We can actually offer the opportunity to eliminate waste kitchen scraps that would otherwise be going in the waste stream as a nutrition source for growing organic plants. But a hot composting method would work. However, hot composting is very difficult to manage. Most home compost piles do not get hot enough to actually go through the proper microbiological process. They're supposed to get up around 120, 130 degrees or hotter to really to pasteurize and leave only the beneficial bugs, beneficial microbes, and break down the organic matter, so the nutrients that are available actually are released and available when you reuse that compost for container gardening. So through vermicomposting, it's a cold process, and instead of the heat and the microbes and the kind of the heat-loving microbes, we're relying on macro invertebrates, or in this case, vermicompost usually refers to redworms or worms. So the red wigglers actually eat the compost, quite literally, but they're actually eating an early successional bacteria that's rotting the compost. So as your kitchen scraps decay, the red wigglers come and actually eat the bacteria that's doing the decaying. And through this process, through the manure that these worms generate, they're actually freeing a lot of the nutrients and a lot of macro and micronutrients, which have been shown to be available in vermicompost products, whether they're the manure product or a tea or leachate generated from it.
And then another benefit to the worm process is when you put worms in a garden tower, they're going to double their population roughly every 6 to 9 months. Those worms, as they travel through the soil searching for sand to help their digestive process, are creating oxygen pathways that encircle the root systems. And that's a really, really vibrant way to keep a plant healthy. And they're constantly doing that in this type of system.
So what you're saying is it's all about the worms.
It's all about the worms.
Yeah, so not only do we offer, we have a great provider that grows worms and distributes them very economically to garden tower vermicompost users, but we actually recommend night crawlers as well, because they go through the entire system. We've actually placed mirrors and in some cases cameras down the center of the core of the composting core of a garden tower after the compost has been removed, and you can see the worm pathways throughout the compost. And when you do remove compost down from the lower levels of the tower, that's more finished compost, where your red wigglers aren't going to be working, you will find night crawlers down there further decaying the compost and further processing it. And you can see the channels they create in the soil. So as Colin expressed, they're providing better aeration, they're improving water movement in the soil, and they're kind of keeping things fresh and moving nutrients around.
So that's really cool, because in my vision, it sounds exactly like what's going on in nature, and the fact that you've transported that system to a container is really intriguing.
So let me speak to that just a little more. So this technology is new in a containerized format, but it's ancient. It's in nature all around us, and it's especially similar to a way of creating organic soil in places of the world that had very few organics to begin with. That's used for small-scale agriculture in Africa, for instance. So where you don't have much usable soil, people realized thousands of years ago that they can pile up their organics, and they can start to generate soil as those organic wastes decay, and they can build a garden around that. And that's essentially what we're doing. But we're offering it in a very what is now a pretty sophisticated yet still very elegantly simple design of the Garden Tower 2, and it was the concept behind the original Garden Tower.
And one of the other advantages there, and I obviously agree with everything Joel said, but one of the advantages of using this type of container system to mimic those processes that you'll find in nature or that people have been doing for thousands of years, is that when you do it in a container system that captures whatever water's not used, you're not wasting any water. And one of the unique aspects of this design, which was kind of like not even it wasn't even in front of my brain when I designed it. It was something I realized after the fact, was that the majority of the soil is covered by by the plastic, and there's very little evaporation as a result of that. So when you compare this to just about any other type of gardening, the amount of square foot of soil that's per plant that has access to wind and sun to allow it to evaporate is greatly reduced in this type of system. And then we're capturing every drop that doesn't get initially used, and we're reintroducing that water back into the system. The nice thing is, in a design like this, over time, that water is pulling nutrients that are developed in the system. It's pulling some of those nutrients through the soil, where normally it would be wasted in any form of traditional gardening. Those nutrients would be wasted as they settle beneath the soil. We're capturing those and we're reintroducing those. And as we continue to reintroduce those and create that cycle, that water is becoming more nutrient dense over time. And that's what we call a leachate runoff. And it's something that helps to continuously reinvigorate the soil and to help establish the plants, the roots, and create a very, very nutrient dense food source.
So every time the garden tower is watered, you're watering almost a 3-foot tall column of soil. In a traditional garden, such as a raised bed, which is really a nice, convenient way to garden, the hydrology is such that water is being pulled down. With it goes the soluble nutrients. And the soluble nutrients are the nutrients that have been made available in that system. And so the roots are, in some ways, a passive system, and the nutrients have to come very close to the roots in order for specific relationships to occur and those nutrients to get assimilated into the plant roots. So a lot of studies show most of the nutrients, the vast majority of nutrients that go into a container garden or a conventional garden are not taken up by the soil, but they're lost into the ground or through runoff. So with the garden tower, you're watering that 36-inch column of soil, and within a half day or so, you'll recycle that water back on top, back into the planting area, back into the soil, and those nutrients are more likely to come in contact or near the plant root zones because they're going through this vertical system and they're going through it multiple times. So in that way, it's very, very nutrient efficient, and it's very, very water efficient. And it's very, very simple. In fact, our new garden tower comes with a drawer which collects every drop of this nutrient leachate, and you don't even have to provide a separate container for it, like the thousands of garden towers we have around the country.
That sounds altogether pretty magical, actually. What kinds of things could I plant? Is there a reason why I might not be able to plant certain things because it's confined to this container, or is it a pretty open system?
So the garden tower 2 holds over 6 cubic feet of soil. 6 cubic feet of soil gives you a lot of it's a lot of space for root zones. That's why we can achieve a 50 plant or higher density in about 4 square feet of space because of the sheer volume of this container garden, and the fact that it is more nutrient dense and it does have a nutrient input or a nutrient recycling system via the vermicomposting that makes it unique.
So you talked about something you said when you talk about the garden tower is giving people the ability to grow their own food freely. Why is that important?
I think when you look around at how we grow food, I think the system is broken. And I think anyone that's halfway informed about what's going on in the world probably realizes that. And it's broken in a number of ways. It's broken in the sense that the typical vegetable travels 1,400 miles to get to your plate. That's ridiculous. That uses a lot of fossil fuels, petrochemicals, that creates a lot of pollution. You then have to bring it to a supermarket where it is typically refrigerated in some sort, which uses a lot of biofuels or fossil fuels, which doesn't have to happen. We're using an excessive amount of chemicals to grow our food. The way we grow our food, beyond the chemical use, is a little bit ridiculous because we're growing one crop at a time, and that's really not the way nature intended it to happen, and that's stripping our soil of the nutrients so that the plants that you get from that soil lacks the nutrients to keep you healthy. So, why would you eat a plant like that? I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you would grow food that way.
It sounds like growing food that way, we probably waste quite a bit of food.
We waste about 40% as a nation of the food we buy, and that's probably hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't know the exact figure. I know that the current stats are at about 40%. There's a movement now where people want to eat local, grow local, or the 100-mile diet, so to speak. But even that is somewhat wasteful when you could literally grow something on your deck and be 20 feet from your table. And there's no opportunity to need to throw food away if you're picking it fresh every day. Or you could pick some food for a lunch for salad, and that evening pick again fresh food, right from your garden tower. So you really can't get a fresher, healthier system of growing food than if you're actually growing it at home. And we think that we've provided through this product a really, really unique way of doing that, where unlike most systems, whether it be container or any type of organic gardening or keyhole gardening or raised bed gardening, we are introducing a component which actually increases the nutrient density of food, and that's through the vermicomposter. On top of that, I think that we are being bombarded by chemicals in our environment. I think, you are what you eat. the healthier we can make the food, the healthier we are as a society. And I think when you introduce a ecosystem like a vermicompost within a soil system, I think that's about the healthiest thing you can do for yourself, is growing really, really nutrient-dense, healthy, organic food right next to your table. And that's really what we're offering in this product.
You talked for a moment about the concept of growing one crop.
Yeah.
And how agriculture now grows one crop. It involves a series of chemical implements, and otherwise. You talked about the soil. Can you tell me more about how our soil condition looks out there in these large
I was
centralized
hoping
farms?
you would talk about that.
Okay. Well, it seems like the difference between, from what I've read, monoculture versus polyculture yield really different impacts in the soil condition. Monoculture generally destroying the soil over a period of time, and polyculture in some respects even enhancing, not just enhancing the soil, but making all of the food and plants grow better.
You'll never see nature growing one plant at a time, or unless you have like a field of daisies or something. It's often, nature understands that if you have a fruit tree that's going to bring a lot of water from deep beneath the soil, nature will allow another plant to grow next to it that doesn't have a great ability to gather water. And those are the plants that will prosper next to the tree bringing water to the soil. You'll find that in every culture all over the globe, plants are actually working in conjunction with each other. It works perfectly. And the garden tower, you are actively watering it, but there's tremendous benefits to actually growing several varieties of food in each crop rotation. And that's something that is somewhat hard to do in typical container gardens, but with the garden tower, you're growing anywhere from 50 to 140 plants, and you can really get creative with what you're growing.
One example in the development of the Garden Tower 2, we were looking at how to design a system that could be put together in different components and actually nest together, but still have the structure or a better structure than our unibody previous garden towers had. Well, in figuring out how to improve the stiffness of the design, which we'll put a photo up, I think, but we basically we have a 90-degree sort of shelf on each ring, which makes each ring component, although they're almost an 1/8 inch thick plastic at the growing rings, they now have this structural shelf or bracket underneath them that not only is going to help improve water movement and water absorbance in the soil, but we instantly notice that it will reduce soil compaction over time as well. It's not a major issue with the garden tower, but we use light potting soil so that a heavy column of soil doesn't compact and reduce pore space, which reduces the field capacity or the water holding capacity of the soil. So the new unit, Garden Tower 2.0, will not compact as much over time. It'll help maintain a lighter, loftier soil medium. And that just means better performance because it means more air movement, more water movement, easier movement of organisms. So it's just it's kind of a neat thing because we really did it for structure originally, and then looking at what we could do, it was obvious that there was going to be a biological improvement to the system.
Another cool feature of this next generation 2.0 tower is that we've had a lot of requests from our customers. We have around 4,000 customers across North America, and a lot of people said we want this thing on wheels. And there's an obvious benefit to being able to rotate your garden, especially if you have a vertical garden. So I've incorporated an internal bearing track that we use nylon bearings, which will never rust or decay. And it allows for easy one-handed rotation. And the great thing about that is if most people that are into gardening continue to be into gardening as they age. And everybody reaches a point where it's just not feasible. Your hips are blown, your knees are blown out, or whatever. Arthritis sets in. To be able to pull up a chair or a wheelchair and sit and garden from that comfortable position and bring the plants to you instead of you coming to the plants is just it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing for people to be able to, say, okay, at the end of my gardening career, I'm going to step it back a little bit, but I still want to garden, and I can do it right on my deck.
So with the Garden Tower 2, we've taken sort of the health side of the materials engineering to a whole new level. Not only are we using only food grade plastics, but we are also using only hydrocarbon pure plastics without other additives like bromine and chlorine, phthalates, BPA, other hardeners, softeners, toxic dyes, toxic pigments, none of that. None of that is in it. It's purely hydrogen and carbon, food grade dyes, and a food grade UV absorber it's basically an antioxidant which absorbs the energy of UV light so that the plastic doesn't break down as fast. And that's so that we can get hopefully 10 to 20 years out of every garden tower because they're so solidly built. So
and then in 20 years, recycle it.
Yeah, so it's
Fully
100
recyclable.
It's 100% recyclable, and not only that, but because we're using polypropylene and high density polyethylene, pure hydrocarbon plastics, they are easily replaced in the future by designed or bioengineered plastics. So any source you have for carbon and hydrogen, you can make a quality plastic. The problem is the low cost of petroleum products has kept those bioproduced plastics out of the market. So we don't have them as an option to buy for our manufacturing facility yet, but we intend to be a leader in that area. When we are able to source the plastic we would really like to be making every garden tower out of.
And going, into the future, we want to see the garden tower used all over the world. There's so many places on this planet where it makes even more sense than it does here in America, where people have distribution issues, so they can't get fresh food, or they have soil quality issues, or they have water scarcity issues, or they just have, it's a little bit too hot, a little bit too cold, whatever. There's a lot of places where the garden tower would make perfect sense. And we're really going to try to, as we expand and as we grow, and we have the time and the money to make something like that happen, where we create initiatives that get this distributed on more of a global level as a nonprofit, then we're absolutely going to move forward in that direction. And we're also going to create a whole bunch of accessories. Like right now, I'm finishing up a design on an individual greenhouse for an individual garden tower. And it's something that's going to be really great for people in cities where you can grow food on a flat roof or a porch or a balcony. It's going to be highly adaptable to high wind situations, much like a tent would be, so it's not going to fracture or crack. And it's going to be something that you can apply a whole series of different types of wraps to, anywhere from clear to mylar to sun shading to simple screens. So there's a lot of adaptability there, but it will increase your growth season. Give you a little bit extra at the beginning of the summer, a little bit extra at the end of the summer. Certain situations allow you to grow year round. So that should be coming out in about the fall, probably.
So you'll be able to grow in hot and colder zones, basically.
Yeah.
So speaking to hot and colder zones, one thing that we didn't talk about was why container gardening, or you see this effect in a raised bed garden, why they perform better in hot and cold zones. You actually get a soil temperature that is higher earlier in the year, and actually in a lot of cases stays warmer later in the year with a large raised bed system. You don't see that as much in containers, in small containers, typical container gardens, because at night the soil cools off too much and you have too much of a fluctuation in the root zone temperatures for success in your plants. But the garden tower, like a raised bed, stores a lot of heat. We're 6 to 7 cubic feet of soil and almost 14 gallons of water to a field capacity. So you're at about 210 pounds of water and soil, which gives you the heat storage you need to get some extended season growing capabilities out of the garden tower. And in that, that alone makes it one of the highest performing container gardening systems out there, and that's without the vermicomposting integration. Also, and we'll tie this back in after Colin talks about what we want to do around the world, So in the near future, we will be designing and coming out with a lower cost of production garden tower specifically for food programs domestically and internationally that could actually be made anywhere with injection molding technology, which is widely distributed around the entire globe. But it will be made using less plastic, but more importantly, less complex molds, and it will lack some of the higher end features that don't make the garden tower work, but they are important to our current user, such as the rotation. The rotation is really excellent to be able to change the orientation of the tower so light hits different plants. However, it's not essential because even when the garden tower is out in a field and not against a structure, we still get pretty good performance on the back side, provided that the plants don't require the intensity of light that a tomato or a fruiting plant might. So if you can still plant greens or foliar vegetables on the back side of the tower and fruiting vegetables facing the sun, and get great performance all the way around. So without the rotation, it still works very, very well. If it's up against a structure, the light coming off that structure, if it's a relatively light color like white, gray, brown, the siding colors, natural tones, there's plenty of reflective light. So we even have tomatoes, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, fruiting veggies on the back do really well. So eliminating the track or the bearing track, it's actually quite complex, so that it never gets dirty, doesn't get water in it, supports 200 pounds for the life of the unit. Eliminating that saves us several dollars in the manufacturing, which saves the end user a lot of money. So
And we'll probably also eliminate the drawer for the food service program, garden towers. And it's a unique idea because most food service programs, to my knowledge, provide food. Why not provide a tool in which to grow your own? And even the places in the world that have poor soil quality teach people how to grow soil. Grow the soil, fill your tower, grow your food. So, provide the garden tower once, teach people how to save seeds from the plants that they grow, and you've done your job. You can move on to the next, needy area or needy population. We need to spend a little bit more time focusing on growing the company. It takes an enormous amount of time to branch off into an endeavor like that, but that is absolutely part of our plans. We would like to see the garden tower utilized on a global scale to really make a difference in people's lives, especially where they lack access to good soil, good water, good food, or they have transportation issues. This can really solve all those problems. Teach people to grow their own soil, put it in the garden tower, grow your food, save your seeds, repeat the process, and move on to the next needy area. And we really, think that could be a wonderful way to help people around the world, with the garden tower.
What kind of advice would you give to someone like me who's never gardened? I find the idea of it to even be a little bit challenging, but the garden tower gives me a little bit of hope. However, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Just go for it. I mean, everybody can grow food. It's not difficult. The nice thing is with the garden tower, it's actually easy. First of all, there's no weeding, there's no tilling, there's no soil preparation. Start with a good potting soil. If you want to make it a little easier, get some starter plants as opposed to going from seed, but you can do either one. Make sure you're very careful about your water in the first couple weeks. With the garden tower, you might want to water each individual hole individually until the roots have a chance to root. After that, you simply water from the top, check it every day, and you will have success. I mean, it really works well. This is a well-designed system, and I think that anyone that has a desire to garden will be very happy with the garden tower. You follow the instructions, and we have tons of information on our website. You do not need a gardening experience to be a very productive garden tower grower. And the end result is you can have super healthy, nutrient-dense food for you and your family. And just go for it. It's easy.
Speaking from someone that's seen thousands of people grow with the garden tower, indirectly and many directly, whether you're starting in a very large container gardening system, such as the garden tower, or you're starting in a small pot, most critically is that you use a reasonable quality potting soil. We actually have had customers go out and buy topsoils and different forms of fill and soil that were not at all a potting matrix, in which case it's quite difficult to grow successfully. Because of the way vegetables have been bred for hundreds of years, they really require generally a loose, aerated matrix of soil. And starting off with a decent potting soil doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be organic. And then if you're going to add a plant food, make sure it is not necessarily organic, but 100% natural. And we suggest staying away from a lot of the manure products, which come from high intensity, high density animal farms, which are way too high in sodium, which for instance causes issues in container gardening systems and is not the healthiest product to use for plant food. So starting off with a good soil, going out and buying a starter plant or being a little more ambitious and starting from seed requires a little more knowledge, but it's still very easy whether you're growing in a small pot or in a garden tower. Starting off with the soils is probably the most important thing, and learning a little bit about how plants like to be watered. Most vegetables like to go from a point of full field capacity, which is the soil's holding as much water as it will without draining out, to a 40% of field capacity level of hydration. So you want to see this curve basically. You've watered up here and then you go to 40% of kind of the weight of water in that soil, back up to 100 and then back down. So that's an ideal soil watering regime, and it allows the microbes and the macrobes and the plants to really flourish together in the soil. It's not something you'd find in a hydroponic setting, but that doesn't rely on any of the ecology. So understanding a little bit about a good watering regime will get you a long way in container gardening, whether it's the garden tower or anything else. So if you're watering the garden tower, I consider a heavy watering to be about 5 to 6 gallons and a light watering to be 3 to 4 gallons. To know when you need to water, all you have to do is kind of feel the soil in a lower pocket of the tower. And the water travels, it actually travels up the tower as the plants wick up. So whenever you're doing any type of gardening, soil is your most critical, most foundational factor in how successful you're going to be. Plants need air. Plants need to breathe. The root zone needs to exchange gases just like the leaves do. So you need porous soil. You can't grow anything in heavily compacted soil. You need soil with a reasonable amount of organic matter to hold nutrients, to hold moisture, and to have a kind of a loftier lightness, which comes from, in the case of potting soil, comes from coires, comes from peat moss, comes from other structure like vermiculite. So here when we're talking about container gardening, you really are looking for a potting soil which has a nice light matrix, and the organic matter which helps lighten it up also holds a lot of nutrients. The surface area of humus, or basically mostly decayed organics, is massive, and it creates little ionic areas, little ionic surfaces for nutrients to be held onto, and those nutrients will be made available as microbes basically make them available in relationships with plant roots.
So the composting is creating this compost tea. What's happening there?
Well, basically, your organic matter is contained within the compost column, and your worms are in the compost column feeding directly off the organic matter. Water will pass through the system, pass through the soil, but the worms have already spread their manure through the soil system after they've, basically had their meal within the compost tube. What we've also noticed, and Joe can get into a little bit more behind the science of the compost tube, but what we've noticed is that often the plant roots will directly feed off the perforated holes in the compost tube, which means the roots are directly feeding off organic fertilizer. So they're literally getting everything they need. And one of the beauties of that type of ecosystem is that you can place plants very close together because they're not fighting for nutrients, which is why on the garden tower you can see that our holes are quite close to each other, much closer than you would see in a typical garden, and why we've had great luck doubling up plants in the holes because they're not fighting for the nutrients. As into the specifics of the compost tube, Joel can get in a little bit more on the science behind that.
So Colin mentioned the density of plants and the fact that the plants have more nutrients. Well, all you have to do is look at a typical hydroponic system to understand that if the plants have an excess of nutrients, they can put more energy into actually growing the greens, growing the vegetables, growing the stems, blossoming, and producing fruit. So, you know, the more nutrient dense you can make the system and keep it healthy, the higher performance you're going to get out of it. Colin mentioned the vermicompost tube. Well, the tube in the Garden Tower 2 has over 260% more surface area of perforations, which is more area available for plants to root directly into the compost. So that's exactly what we observe. We see the plants moving to the moisture and moving to the nutrients. Again, that's why you water the garden tower from the top, because you want to basically saturate that entire soil column, not just the root zone near the surface, but the root zone near the compost tube. So through having this 6-inch core of compost and over 6 inches or 7 inches of soil surrounding it, the plants have a really unique, very natural, very what you would expect to find in a plant community growing in the wild type of growing environment.
So right there, you're not only getting an ideal growing environment for a plant, but the end result is you get a food or a plant food that is very, very nutrient dense. And that's not something you can find even if you go to your organic supermarket, because of the very nature in the way we grow our fruit today, where you're losing a certain amount of the nutrients through the soil. Every time you get a heavy rain, whatever's not immediately picked up by the root systems will filter beneath the soil and be lost. In the garden tower, it all gets recycled back into the soil system. So you end up with super nutrient dense food. So you're not only providing the ideal growing environment, you're growing the most ideal food you could eat.
In the case of the garden tower, instead of inorganic inputs like synthetic fertilizers, like kind of dirty manures, as in manures that are really high in chemicals like sodium salts, metallic salts, heavy metals, things that do accumulate in our environment and do get in the food chain. Instead of having a system which is kind of inorganically supported or sort of on life support, we have a system that really supports itself to a large extent, with only really feeding on waste organic food or waste kitchen scraps, and allowing that to actually produce nutritious foods.
Okay. Why is it a good idea to recycle your compost?
Your compost is basically leafy biological matter, which has spent its whole life converting the sun's energy and drawing nutrients up from the soil. That's basically its purpose on this planet. And at the point at which you eat it, whatever nutrient density that it contains will then end up in your soil system with the garden tower. So you are continually putting nutrients into the system, and then you're taking nutrients out of the system as you harvest your plants. You're then having a meal. You're then taking your scraps. You're putting it back into the system. So you are recycling not only your compost, but it's a living system that keeps recycling upon itself. So.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Closed loop.
Yeah.
Close the loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
How have you guys gotten it to this point and reached this kind of success so far?
I think really it's several things. Frankly, I think I got really lucky with the design. There's a lot of factors that I realized later that play a crucial role in how well it works that weren't part of my initial thought process. For instance, the fact that The plastic covers the majority of the soil, so it's has very little evaporation. I didn't plan on that. That's something I realized after I started testing it. So a lot of things like that happen after the fact. So we started with a great product, and without that we wouldn't be here. But beyond that, social media, Facebook, and Kickstarter specifically have been just an enormous benefit to us. We've raised almost $500,000 through 2 Kickstarter programs for a food project. I mean, that says a lot, and people really want to see this thing. They want to see this thing happen. And so, to all our Facebook fans, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I mean, it's just amazing the support we've got. We've got 45,000 Facebook likes. We have, almost $500,000 with Kickstarter, like I said. Social media and people supporting us through word of mouth, and a good design or a great design is why we're here. And obviously a great team. Doesn't hurt.
Could you guys just leave me with one last quote, bit of wisdom, moment of zen, lesson you've learned?
Let me think.
Well, I will and I always, I want to speak to the thousands of customers we've had and the 1,000+ Kickstarter backers that since 2011 we've had great social support for the Garden Tower. It's helped us in a big way. We were able. We actually had an early buyer of the Garden Tower become a reseller of the Garden Tower, even with the low margin on a handmade product, and later help us get a lot of the early startup funding that we really need to make this transition to full-scale production of the Garden Tower 2. And then it was with the help of our Kickstarter backers and our other followers and our other pre-orderers, customers, that really allow us to produce on a scale which is economical and sustainable, and will allow us to grow as we move forward. So it's been a huge journey. There's been a ton of very exciting moments, and we can't wait for the future, because we really want to fulfill on our desire to make the world a healthier place, make people's lives a little bit more enjoyable, and we want to be a leader in producing a product that does more good than resources used. And
we want to give people the ability to take control of their own food. I mean, that's really what this is all about. You can grow healthy food at home. You can grow healthy organic food at home. You really don't need experience. When you have a product that works as well as the Garden Tower, you can just set it up and do it and go. And if the plants have the sun and the nutrients that they need, and they're in a very high quality potting soil, you can't mess it up. It's going to work. The Garden Tower works really, really well. I don't think we've yet had a single return. We've sold about a little over 4,000. We've never had a single return because of this thing didn't perform the way you said it would. I mean, we've had returns because the color was wrong, or they thought the terracotta tower was terracotta clay instead of a terracotta colored plastic tower. But we've never once had that I know of, a customer say this didn't work like you said it would.
So for you, it's all about helping people take control.
Yeah, I mean, you can grow food at home, and you can grow an enormous amount of food at home with the Garden Tower. With this new generation, if you add a couple of rings and double up the holes, which you can with most plants, you can grow 140 plants in an area this big. And that's just unheard of. There's no other product that does that, and it's really easy. So we're really excited about the next generation Garden Tower, and we hope you all check out our website, and we have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of our first generation. You can see how well that worked. This one we expect to work a little bit better, a little bit more functionality. So check out our website, and thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I am amazed at how this project fits into my life. I'm pretty handicapped. I'm not able to get down onto the ground, so I was looking for some kind of gardening option that would be a little bit up off the ground. And the fact that I'm living in a condominium, I really just don't have much space where I can plant, you know, different plants. I have a lot of flowers, but I don't have any place where I can have vegetables or herbs. And so the idea that the garden tower can come in and give me all the flexibility and all the space that I want is huge. And I'm just amazed.